Today we're live with Action Spot Studio with one of our first companies and believers in Action Spot, and we believed in David. The company used to be called Very Motion, now it's Torque. It's like we keep developing and running momentum. So I'd like to thank David for coming today
No
doing this live interview. I truly believe in your product. I think the solution is fantastic and the solution has a place in the market. So before we start, or maybe before we start talking, and it will be completely informal, so no prep. Can you tell a little bit about yourself, what you do? What David Elzey?
What I do? Well, when I came out to California, it wasn't too long until I got involved in sort of the computer revolution into graphics. That is my history. I am a graphic designer, product designer. And so this new tool was, just drew me to it. And so I just kept going until eventually I wanted to work on the most difficult things, obviously, that computers allow us to do, which are computer animation and visual effects. So right as PC computing started to breach and overcome, say, Silicon graphics systems at that time in the 90s, I really got involved in that. And I was troubleshooting a lot of companies. I ended up being a hired gun that would come in toward the end of projects to solve the problems that were stopping them from delivering. So it was both very rewarding and frustrating because they didn't really want to hire me. There's a little animosity having somebody come in the company and fix the problems and get paid more than the people who work there. So to keep the teams harmonious, they often really just would say, "We'll call you again when we need you." They like that. And, but it also got me thinking, why am I doing this for other people? So that would have been my second startup. Would have been to then go in and we had animation visual effects company. I started with my wife, Red Gypsy Animation. So that got me down that path of doing this, and we always really felt that we should be doing video games. But that was a huge hurdle because we weren't programmers, and you need that other element, especially back then, very programming heavy and graphics light. So as that started to change, though, we started penetrating into the video game market, developing assets, doing show reels for them, and then eventually that led to us getting our fingers into doing interesting stuff for trade shows, etc. Getting a little further away from animation visual effects, which we were really doing hundreds of shows a year for cable channels and stuff this time. So we had an income to sort of support our side track at that point. And then we got a really good opportunity one time by somebody who completely misunderstood what our company did, thank God, and offered us to do, came to us and said, "I have this museum project. It's due in 6 months and it needs 18 exhibits completed." And I agreed to do it. I mean, it certainly didn't seem that profitable at the time. I was wrong, but because of the amount of work needed to be done. But it was a great opportunity then to get away from doing broadcast work for the company. So we took it on and we delivered just in time. As far as I know, they're still running. So that really put us on a new track. So we renamed the company Excellent. And we started doing interactive. And for some reason, we were really drawn to doing projects that nobody had ever done before. And that was a good way to sell the project. We would do a small spec piece, etc., and show them this is something nobody's done before. And it tended to be deeply immersive experiences. And I don't know, probably because I was a designer, it was something I was drawn to. But that got us down that path. We started doing, I wouldn't say exclusively, but all of our big projects were these deeply immersive experiences, and we would draw in clients strictly to do those. So that company did well. I mean, it started building up, doing well. Of course, we hit a recession, and
everyone did.
And museums no longer had people donating money. Trade shows all got cut back. Their marketing departments cut back, and even government agencies who had projects that weren't completely funded, they dropped all of those. So we moved the company from LA to Austin at the time to save money. We rebuilt the company over the time. It came back very strong, and then we ended up selling that company. And I'm sitting here now like, okay, the one thing I know I know how to do is our deeply immersive experiences. So when it came time for this project, it was really about utilizing my strong skill set into something that I thought was really needed. I mean, what are really neat things? As you know, we started the company out as Free Motion, which was a fitness and rehabilitation, physical rehabilitation company, really focused on fitness. Because we identified the primary reason that people, really the behavioral science of why people don't exercise and how to address that. And as we pursued that,
I'm not exercising, but I like his body. Oh my God, from day one it was amazing.
Well, in pursuit of that, in pursuit of like dealing with that, we found like a lot of people who were really good at exercising stopped exercising because they got injured. And a lot of people who are exercising now are really struggling with nursing some injury. Excuse me. So what we did was we said, we can't release a product that doesn't address this.
Right.
And since our existing platform already had robotics, it was a natural next step. And it was, and then that gets into the whole story of our new company, Torque3, which is a neural rehabilitation platform. To be fair, it is actually very close to being the same platform with some software, with some software changes. So that is our current direction to address something that really has touched me. And in the development, I found this out, some things out, and I really found that we can make an immediate difference in this.
So that's perfect to segue into this. So the question would be, I know that you went to East Coast for the conference, and that's how this whole neural rehabilitation project engaged.
Sort of, very close.
Right.
What we did was we had a potential investor in the physical side of it, the fitness physio rehabilitation side of it, come in, who was potentially a very lucrative investor. So what I did was I arranged to have our science advisor, Dr. Walter Greenleaf from Stanford, and he had not seen he's a very busy man, so he had not actually seen the prototype. So he comes by and we do a demo I give him a demo right before the investor meeting, and he's stunned and he says, David, I think you've created just a phenomenal neural rehabilitation device. Now, something not even on our radar at this point. And I sort of said, okay, and I thought that's a side project that we could pursue later. But I didn't, for some reason in my brain, I'm thinking, well, this isn't viable, I'll never get investments, and it's new. And when you have momentum in a direction, like you're saying, I'm going to do this, and everybody's got a different idea of how they could use your product.
Yeah,
if you're a founder out there, you already know what I'm saying, but you have to really almost say thank you for your idea, but take that idea, don't throw it away, but don't jump from one shiny thing to another. And so I'm very naturally very resistant to those types of ideas. But Walter's a smart guy, and I think he knows this. So what he did was he arranged for me to have a speaking engagement in Boston at the virtual reality symposium, medical symposium. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it was.
We can put it in a link later on.
Yes, I think they have one next month in Arizona. I don't know if I'm going or not yet, but he arranged for me to have a speaking engagement there. So I get in free to the symposium. I have to fly out and do this. So of course I'm going to do it. So I go out and I network and I talk to people, and the scientific and medical community are very interested in what I'm doing. So it makes me think more. So now I'm on a research project while continuing to do the same, but it's really sort of one of those things you spend maybe 4 or 5 hours a week on, looking up neurorehabilitation, learning and understanding what's going on, because it's completely foreign to me. And then I went to, in the middle of the summer, I went over, I was invited by a somebody who was also a previous member of Action Spot that we had made friends with, and he invited me to a barbecue on 4th of July, on Independence Day. So his dad had a stroke. And I sat down next to him, and it was, I wanted to talk to him about it. And I thought he was going to regale me with the technologies that had been used in his rehabilitation. And first I found out it's been 2 years, and he's still, sort of about the same level as he was from 6 weeks afterwards. No real change. But yet he goes in every, however many days a week for rehabilitation. And then I find out they're just putting him on a stationary bike and pedaling. And I already know from my research, this is exactly the wrong thing to do. And there's a phenomenal amount of research. So it got me that got me sort of confused. I was really, why would they do that? And so I started researching rehabilitation more. And my worst fears are like, which makes you really angry, it's economics. The insurance companies pay the same amount to the provider for putting a guy on a stationary bike or a yoga mat as they would for a high-end solution, a real solution. There's no economic incentive to give quality care. And there's a limitation. So they just run these guys out to the end of whatever their insurance is on their rehab, and that's that. So that made me angry. That was like, well, wait a minute. That's not right. I mean, so they may get decent care in the first 6 weeks if they're inpatient, depending on the facility. Right. Large variance from facility to facility. But when it comes to actually going out past that point, you're outpatient. Unless you have a lot of money and can just pay to go where you want, you are not going to get very good treatment, typically speaking. And it's also geographically, this makes a big difference too. In the Bay Area, there is a lot of options here if you have the money. In many other places, if you're outside of certain metropolitan areas, you probably don't have any options at all, unless you decide to just go to, again, a lot of money involved, go pay for an inpatient. They have certain inpatient neurorehabilitation inpatient facilities you can pay for. There's a waiting list for these places to get into and to get real care. So that just made me angry because, they're saying it's not affordable, but it is. So that's just a business case to solve. That's not, and I understand there are a lot of hard problems to solve to get things to resolve, to make things work. But the background research has been done. This has now become an engineering problem. So you have an engineering and business problem. Yeah, exactly. It makes it easier. Yeah, the underlying research is complete and says this works on the medical side. Then you have an engineering and a business problem. And we already were 90% there. So it became a very easy decision. I, of course, all the investors had to have a discussion, explain why I wanted to do this, why we could generate a business plan that would be profitable for the company, and get this started, and actually get to market much faster than a consumer product, which was our previous focus. So yeah, going into doing in this really, it made a lot of sense, but there's no way I could have seen this from the beginning. And it doesn't actually preclude the long-term vision of the company, still with the exact same platforms, going into physical rehabilitation and fitness, because all we're doing is software changes to an existing platform. Yeah. So
this is quite interesting. So what that leads you to the question: what exactly is Torque3?
That's for people. For people listening, it is pretty much a mystique if you haven't actually seen it, because I describe it as a platform. But what we have is, and I think I want to step back one step. Okay, so to solve the problem of, you have two major problems that need to be solved if you're going to provide effective neurotherapy. Okay, now neurotherapy is essentially brain injury, TBI, traumatic brain injury. So what I'm saying about stroke could also be applied to somebody who's been in an accident or had, there's a list of other things that fall in this that have create brain injury. Okay. So what happens is when you damage the part of that brain, you're not going to grow back those brain cells. That's not going to happen. You have a lifetime injury in your brain, simply never going to happen. And because it's more likely you had this injury on one side of the brain, central is all, it's on one side or the other, you're going to have some one side of your body is going to be affected, typically with some level of paralysis called hemiparesis. And it can be completely paralysis, or it can be where it's just, you're getting along. But you can be, there's many levels called the Rankin scale, from anywhere from in bed to out doing activities. So, but you're never going to be 100%. That's a given. The question is can you live an independent lifestyle? We get you to that point? But but since we can't regrow brain cells yet, the question is how do we do it? Well, there's a natural process for this, and it's called neuroplasticity. And what that means is your brain is plastic. It can plastic typically mean to reshape, but instead of reshaping, the point is it can actually reconnect, remap the neural pathways. Huh. It can use parts of the brain that were doing one thing before and redo them for other. I mean, and it's interesting that there's cases where people have been going through the process of rehabilitation to where they'll have one set mirror another. So they'll be learning to do their fingers, and some other part of their body may move as well, because it's remapping across these two. And eventually it will split it, but while they're learning, so it remaps neural pathways around the damaged area, makes new connections, reassigns. Yeah, so it reassigns what your brain should be doing and finds areas that can do it naturally. This is the plasticity of the brain. And plasticity is not fixed. They used to believe that once you got to be an adult, the brain plasticity was fixed. And this is absolutely not true. They've proven now that what happens as you get older, plasticity is more difficult to access. Okay? And this all comes down to something which Walter is the hugest proponent I've ever met on this. And he points out that routine is brain death. And what he means is if you do the same routine every day and you don't vary it, your brain has nothing new to do. And it essentially atrophies. And this is the opposite of plasticity. So if there's an opposite, that means, there's quite a few researchers who use that. It's like that's what led me to this. And so I think Grassley's really big in if there's there's a negative side of this effect, there's a positive side. So what happens is you can go in now and you can stimulate the brain. Stimulate it with something exciting, something to really get your brain going. It turns on the learning mode, just like when you were a kid and everything was exploring. When your brain was completely, about plasticity, you can recreate that, and you can then create it. So what happens is now your brain is receptive to change. Mm-hmm. Change inside the brain means neural pathways, remapping, not regrowth, but changing how things are wired in the brain. And so you can hear. Now, the best research on ways to until they come up with a better solution, because there's a lot of people trying to access this right now, the best solution right now are deeply immersive experiences. Things that are safe, really safe for you to do, but really, potentially intense and very engaging. So the only way really to do that would be virtual reality. So, and I don't mean virtual reality just with the headset, mind you. I mean fully immersed virtual reality.
So basically, I don't have to sit with the
right.
element
Right. One of the problems with virtual reality is if you and I are sitting here virtually speaking, I can't reach up and pick up this cup, feel its weight,
and
take a drink. I can't touch the table. I don't hear traffic going by. None of this, or I might hear the traffic going by. But you get the point. Is if a big truck went by, I wouldn't feel the rumble necessarily. I would just see these things, and that's the big problem with the perception. VR headsets are not virtual reality. They're one component of it. So we had to solve this. We had to come across and solve this. So we have already solved it because we knew to change behavior for fitness, we had to attain a level of virtual reality that had not yet been done. So that's why we call it the platform. The platform is a amalgamation of many systems to give you this experience. And we present it as a recumbent bicycle. We were recumbent for several reasons. One is to be in a VR system, we had to say, what are our limitations? You know, if you were on an upright bicycle, well, how do we lean you and keep the sensations correct with G-forces, etc.
So you basically, you engage the entire body
right.
and all the...
Right, I have all these things going on, and I had to think, well, how do I deal with the limitations of those? So I'm going to give you G-force feeling, which are really important. If I'm going to give you going over bumps, and if you, and you know, what happens if a bike leans over, falls, or slides? There's too many complexities there that we cannot accommodate without, I mean, we could, but then we're talking about an order of magnitude of price. To do that. So recumbent solves this. It also does a really nice thing because by putting the back at a 45 degree on a recumbent, people with back problems don't have a problem. And that's where you saw several people who tried it out and worried about their back problems, got on it and said, oh no, you know, they were cyclists. They say, well, I used to cycle, but then I hurt my back. And the recumbent community is full of, the real recumbent bicycle community is full of people who have had back problems and now ride recumbent bicycles as a solution. So this 45 degree angle when you're hitting bumps is great, a great solution to that. So we have that platform. Now this sort of dovetails into people who are injured. Because you're injured, you're not going to be able to climb on or off. You need to have it. So our system can lean up, they can just lean back against it, and then it can lower them onto the recumbent bicycle so they don't have to actually ever sit down. They have to, you know, they just need to be upright and then it will lay them back down. So we have a great solution for people who are injured. We built that in prior. So we have a platform that looks like a recumbent bicycle on a fairly compact but large motion simulation system. And there are robotics through the steering and the pedaling and even the grips, etc. To where, when you're pedaling, it feels real. You can actually feel the granularity. I can tell the difference between grass and sand and gravel as I pedal. I got, you know, obviously you feel the larger rocks and things you roll over, but while I'm pedaling, it gets to be an interesting point where I can feel slippage in the tires, where if I'm going down, I'm sliding around a little bit on a trail, I can feel the fact that when I'm pedaling, it's creating slippage in the tires. And like interesting, if it's a downhill and slippery, you often find yourself sort of drifting like a car, because you have four tires, and steering and feeling that. And it's the only way I can imagine you would be able to control it is the fact that between the G-forces and the feedback between the steering and everything, it gives me the sensations I need to make corrections to control the vehicle. So all of this is the deep immersion. Now, of course, because we're in a computer simulation, a game engine, we're really sort of unlimited on what we can pull off for providing experiences. It's just a matter of getting it and creating it. So that's one part of it. We can actually now, somebody can get in and have a session, and it's not just sitting down on a stationary bicycle and going through the motions, which don't do any good. I mean, it's crazy that the insurance company even pay for that. But then, so they can have this plasticity. The real problem, but we run into our second problem now. Here's our problem. If you have had a stroke, you probably have one side of your body has some level of paralysis. Now, how do you get on and pedal? And if you've watched people who have low paralysis, it is a horrible experience for them. They have one side sort of thrusting and pulling and trying to make up for this other side who's not doing that much. And it's a terrible experience. And we had somebody actually who had a prosthetic try out our system, one of our early testing. And we watched that in effect on our system. And we knew we could fix that from the beginning. During lunch, we actually came up with a lot of ideas on how to solve that problem. Again, we're using a robotic system for everything. So all we had to do now, all we have to do is basically sense out one side and use that as control for the other. So think of it this way: if when you're pedaling something, and so we have the pedals are offset. If this is my control side on my left hand, and my right hand is my other foot, this one's strong. So I know going over the top that, say, this push side is 80, 90% of what the power that would be. So this one should be only, on the pulling back, should only be, say, 20%. But if it's not getting that, if I'm getting 80 here and not 90 here, well, then I accommodate that in the system.
Right.
So We just, everywhere around the arc, we know what the power ratio should be between the two. So whatever you're applying on your control foot, we smooth it out by making error. Same thing with steering and grips, everything across the board. And because all of our systems are powered, not passive, we can actually go even beyond that and cover other things like injury prevention. For example, let's say that just because you had a stroke doesn't mean you're not injured. You know, which is completely has nothing to do with your stroke. You just may have a bad knee or a hip or whatever. So it may be that that one side should never exceed a certain amount of power. Otherwise, it would prevent it. So we can, since we're measuring the power applied on that side, we can always, as you get to it, just take it away from you. Say, okay, well, no, you're not allowed to apply that much force. So let's say you get startled while you're playing and you're going through doing whatever, and something startles you, or you just decide to race somebody beyond your means, or whatever the deal is, we can make sure that it may feel weird as we do it, but you won't get injured. So we can apply injury prevention on top of all of this. The robotic side of it is actually very cool. It allows a lot of things on top of deep immersion. So between these two things, we have this great platform. And there are a lot of other things that we can say that we can do, but those two factors alone, nobody else is doing. Nobody's providing a level of deep immersion, and nobody is providing a solution to hemiplegia. So
you're addressing both.
We're addressing both,
hemiplegia and the deep immersion.
Yes.
So and you're addressing a population which is actually in need for that.
Yes. Anybody that has some sort of brain injury. Stroke is the most common. It is the leading cause of disability, not only in the United States, but the world. So we're looking at about, right now, we have a population of about 6.5 million people in the United States that are in that ranking of they're disabled because of stroke. We have that goes up about 680,000 every year and growing. Primarily, and although you can say that we have our seniors who are the most common with stroke. They're most common. However, the highest growth rate, and now granted, highest growth rate means if you go from 1 to 2, it's a high growth rate, right? But still, the highest growth rate of stroke survivors are millennials, the young. This is because we live in a world of abundance and sugar and fat and all these things that make you are healthy for you, and stress. All these things that are healthy. If you had a genetic propensity for cardiovascular disease, anyhow, this can trigger it much earlier.
Right.
Now, they're also the group that has the highest level of plasticity naturally because of their age. So they have better recovery, which is great because now we have the study group of what happens when you have high plasticity and recovery. So they have the best recovery rates. But the real trick is they would have even better recovery rates, but then you have our seniors who there's no reason they can't tap into that recovery rate as well. So we're talking about moving people up in order of magnitude on the Rankin scale. People go from bedridden to the wheelchair, from the wheelchair to using the elbow crutch, from using the elbow crutch to using a cane, from using a cane to going out. Being fine with, the cane is sort of the almost there, but if you can get rid of the cane, nobody really knows at that point. That's the person that walks around and nobody has any idea they've had a stroke. So we can move them up one order of magnitude on the Rankin scale. We are more doing this based upon looking at young stroke survivors and how fast they go up and how fast they recover. So this is a big deal.
It's huge. So that's Torque, and I know that Walter is helping you with that, right?
Yes.
So what is his engagement? How does he play? What is his role? And
Walter is among VR and neurobehavior and neuroscience. In that world, in that little Venn diagram, behavioral science, virtual reality, and neuroscience, he's a bit of a celebrity in that. So having Walter is great, name recognition, and when we get him ability. But to be fair, Walter's a very busy guy.
Yeah.
I mean, his speaking engagements are just nonstop. and his offers to serve on different companies are nonstop, etc. And you got to imagine he wants some personal life to himself. So I would say his relationship with the company is phenomenal because of his interest in it. We're very grateful because we're such a small young startup that he would get involved with us. But our expectations are grateful versus we don't have a lot of like, well, we just get Walter over here, because we'll call him up. We know that Walter probably isn't even in California at any point in time.
Right.
He's traveling. So, but yeah, we don't get Walter involved too much except for review and comments and stuff. And he feeds us the information. He said Walter is he's a bit of a guiding hand. From the background.
He's helping you to level set.
This whole neurohabilitation thing is his fault. It's like,
there you go.
I blame it completely on him. He saw it and he sowed the seeds and and he nurtured it along and to see what would happen. And so that's great, and we're really grateful for that. But he's a really busy guy. Even if we were a Fortune 500 company, I don't know we'd get more out of him because he's got so many irons in the fire. Yeah.
So what is Torque is looking for right now? What's the biggest problems or obstacles you're facing today? And where do you want to go in the next year, 2 years, like a roadmap for Torque?
Right, and it's a great question. So what we have is a series of interlocking problems to solve. And solving one problem often makes the other one more difficult. A good example is to be deeply immersive, I need to make it as realistic as possible.
Right.
The more realistic I make it, the more difficult it is for me to prevent you from getting motion sick. Now, we've got the basics in there right now. We've got motion simulation that simulates the G-forces. We've got we do many things in the design to help reinforce parts of your brain into it. But it is actually that's a challenge. We still have many challenges to do like that. So on the engineering side, we still have to address many things. We know stopgap solutions that can say, well, to kick the ball down. Okay, well this will solve it for now, but then as we get better, then we'll have to go down. So that's one of our problems. Is each time we come up with a great solution, it often puts pressure on other sides of the coin. Everything. The robotics is another thing. It's like more power means more. What do I do with all this spare electricity that this person's creating? The motors don't want it, not much of it at least. Our motors pretty much to drive everything are scavenging off of the fact that these people are pedaling are generating electricity. So once they get going, the motors don't need any electricity. Right. But the real question is, so for example, right now we're just throwing it away. We don't have a use for it, so we throw it to capacitors and bleed it off as heat.
Oh.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's a limitation to that too. But right now, that's how we do it. But it's crazy that we're throwing electricity away. And it has limitation. There's only so much you can throw away without just adding more capacitors and more heat fins and stuff. So but yeah, we have people are being generators. When they pedal, they're generating electricity, and we're not using much of it. We're just not because it's mainly you're pedaling against motors, and they're pushing back against you. About 120 times a second, they make a decision on how much force they should apply.
Wow.
So it's very dynamic, but the real question is what do we do with all that electricity? So our stopgap solution is this. Now, the better we get at the motors, the more electricity we're going to produce. And so it's because...
Well, that's the next business solution.
Yes.
The guys who will do electric,
well,
ideally,
we'd like to route it back into the motion sim, which uses a lot of electricity.
Why not sell it to PG&E? We definitely need it.
Well, even semi pedaling, I don't think we'll use all electricity the motion sim needs, but that's another thing. That's something we can just deal with later. That's
right.
Don't need it for the MVP, don't need it for going to market, So we run into many of these hurdles going forward on the tech side. And of course, like any other startup, funding is,
it's a problem.
Right, that's the fuel that makes the engine run.
Right.
We need to be able to pay for these things.
So you are now going through the next round of fundraising.
Yeah, we stopped fundraising on the fitness side. late summer last year. Went in and because it would be disingenuous to take in a brand new investor on one idea and then say, oh, and by the way, we sort of knew that we were going to change our go-to-market as we were signing on. That would be a bad idea. Don't do that. That's that's a good way to get in a lot of trouble.
Exactly.
So we stopped fundraising late summer when we decided to do this, like late August, and we had, of course, after a discussion with all the existing investors, we went out and decided what we have to do, and then that means that's a lot of research. That's interviews and discussions, going and speaking to professionals. We brought on our new Chief Science Officer, Timothy Elzey, which a phenomenal find.
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, Tim is phenomenal. He took and he developed projects for the Air Force when he was in it, along with Walter, who did the introduction. And so these really big tech projects being introduced into the medical systems of the government, he oversaw those. So he's very good at bringing technology into medicine. And on top of that, for a year, he ran neurorehabilitation at Fort Walter Reed.
Oh, so it's like
so he really understands the subject matter. He's a practicing physician, and he's still doing clinical work, and he's also got this background history in technology. He still works. He has a side business where he works for other companies to write up their tech papers, etc. So he's a phenomenal find for the company, so that was one of the things we did. We had to, if we're going to be a company that works on this side, we need a chief science officer.
Yeah,
It's just an absolute. So we brought in a chief science officer, and I'd been hesitant to bring any more executives into the company until I had grown. But so at that point in time, I also knew I needed a chief technology officer because I didn't want to leave that position open if we're going to do it. And I already knew who that filled that. That was the person who had been working with technology from day one, which was my friend Evan, who I've been working with for, I want to say 12 years, but I think I've been saying 12 years for too long. So it's probably more like 15 years since I've been saying 12 years for a long time. I've been working with him for a long time. We've done so many big, crazy, impossible projects together that we just have a lot of history bringing things together. So that team put together. And then we started looking, we're toward the end of the year, so we're raising money over holidays. If you're a founder, you know what that's like, startup. So I really started coming out the first year. Let everybody settle down, middle of January. As you know, we did the branding change from Free Motion to Torque3. Yeah. Also went from LLC to an A, so we're a corporation now. And
you a C Corp or S Corp?
A C Corp, yeah.
So basically that means you can accept international investment.
Yes, absolutely. And we knew that the thing with Free Motion is it had probably a 2-year cycle to get to consumer market. Consumer market's very finicky. You don't just go to consumer market, and since we had a large hardware platform to reduce risk and make sure we could go in correctly, we were going to keep sort of prototyping out into the market. Prototyping a level, another level, with the market and seeing how that worked versus building it all out and throwing it. But that was going to take a couple of years. Meanwhile, while we're being supported by investment. This is very different. I don't have consumers deciding this. I have the medical community. And we're making it where it's almost zero cost to them in the business plan. So we can go to market very quickly. I figure 8 months from the time we get funding, we can be in market with 10 to a dozen platforms out there, and that are generating revenue immediately. And how that works, which by the way, this is the idea, the other part of the problem, right? We talked about how do we get this to where it's affordable?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because if you're providing this service to a patient, and you're getting a fixed cost, and let's call that cost, let's say that it's $100, because it's about that. It's a little less, a little more, depending on what you negotiate.
And that's insurance-based, or you
insurance based. So that's the insurance payment. You get about $100 per session. Let's just use that number. It's a good, easy number. How long is it going to take for you to pay off a machine that cost $250,000 of that? Yeah, it's going to be crazy. Now, if all you care about is quality of care, then you can build it into your budget. So the only people who are buying these types of systems out there, these high-end robotics, etc., that they do have, by the way, they don't do it like we do with the deep. They're addressing neuroplasticity or the foundational stuff like we are, much deeper conversation. But there are systems out there that are.
That means we'll have to do another session.
Yeah. So, but what happens is, I think we need images for that one. But what happens is they're just not being, even if you go to Stanford, and say that you have a stroke and you're at the comprehensive stroke center and your inpatient is there, they have to triage to figure out if you can use this high-end piece of equipment because they have so many people to use it and only so many, maybe only one of that one they want to put you on. It's like, do they think that they can move you up on the Rankin scale from out of the wheelchair to the crutch? Or if you're just with a cane, is that just good enough compared to the person they can get out of a bed into a wheelchair? They have to triage that. It's very much a moral choice on their part on the equipment, which is a shame. Even for the people who can afford it and do it, they have bad choices they have to make. They can't, and I don't know how they deal with that. It's going to be tough for them to say like, well, I have the piece of equipment that probably give you the better returning and make your life much better, but I can't let you use it because it's busy with other people who we have deemed better. Maybe they even, and if you're younger, you automatically go up the ladder because you have more life, in front of you than if you're a senior citizen. The older you get, then that's a medical choice. And I'm not blaming them for making hard choices, but it is unfortunate. It can be solved. So our first way of going out with these things is we want to go out into the market and say, if you provide the space that meets our technical requirements, electricity, footage, etc., we will install it for free. And it can stay there as long as you want it to. But we will do revenue share on what you're charging the insurance companies. Now, it's possible because our system is connecting to our servers during every session. So when somebody does a session, they program what it is. We already know because they've disclosed their rates to us. That center's disclosed their rates of what it is. It creates a billing on our side. They get their monthly billing for everything that's been done. They also is, and we can keep them honest because we are keeping all of the records on our side. And we don't have privacy issues because we don't know the name of the patient. We don't care. We just know the username they assign to it. Mm-hmm. And we say, yeah, don't use real names. Don't give us your ID numbers. Right. Make up some username that you add in your records so you can look up our records here. So we have no idea who this person is.
So basically you're meeting the GDPR requirements as well.
Right.
So the data is completely anonymized.
Right.
So that's a good key value.
Yeah, and they on our side, it's completely anonymous at this stage of our company.
Right.
And then so what happens is when they want to see progress or pull it up, etc., they're pulling from that. If they try to say, I want to do a demo round with somebody, which we wouldn't charge for, then there's no record saved. So therefore, there's a disincentive for them to try to do it. And there's really no incentive either because the people using that, it's no money to their pocket, it's for the hospital. So they're going to play by the rules at that level of institution. But we do run into a problem. And as we get these out there, and we're making good money, we can get 100% ROI any system within, say, 3 months. That's not bad on our side for our cost to actually build it and install it. 100% ROI in about 3 months, so 13 weeks, give or take. Our problem really runs into is once we fill up all these inpatient facilities who we trust, where do we go from there? Because the outpatient facilities where the most damning work is being done. And we still have the limitations, decisions to be made. So do I trust outpatient facilities who are using, inflatable balls, mats, and bicycles, the lowest cost facility possible to treat this, to take my system at that point and make money? And it's like, I don't know if I really trust them to do that because they've been running this system as a solution for such a long time. And I don't know if it's I don't know yet, but one thing I do know is we will take a look at all the outpatient facilities, the ones that are credible, the ones that we feel that are running a true and really, we will be happy to work with them. Outside of that though, outside of that we hit stage 2. And stage 2 says that we open our own clinics. Now at this point, we do have to have a server system that is absolutely secure and passes all the standards. So that's one thing that will take a while. But we will open our own outpatient studios, our facilities, where they can come get treatment, where we'll have our own therapists, et cetera, monitoring them. And if you can imagine, say 30 to 50 of these systems in there, so it's a hub, and this is a metropolitan area, obviously. This allows us then to spread this out fairly rapidly.
Yeah.
Because our ROI comes back very quick on that system, but we have a much higher overhead.
Expensive.
Yeah, so it is an interesting thing. And so yeah, our overhead net is not the actual systems being put in there; it's the the staff and managing the building, etc.
So let me ask you this question. I know you're raising funds right now. So how much you have left to raise?
Well, interestingly enough, interestingly enough, under this new model, to go from where we are now to getting 10 systems in the market would require, I'll say a minimum. We could do it with 850,000. We'd be hungry.
That's all.
Yeah, we'd be hungry at 850. Not necessarily bad to be hungry, but we could do it with that amount. We'd run the numbers over and over, and we're used to operating on Hungary, and I have the experience of so many. It's not my first rodeo. I've been for.
But if you're not hungry and you're comfortable and you can have some days off, I know David is working crazy hours.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if that's true.
None of the founders should be having that type
I
of
would think
hustle.
I would think you'd have to get over $2 billion before I wouldn't be hungry.
Right.
But
Okay.
the investment, but 850, and our plan for that is really we break it up into chunks. We say with $50,000, we could then start taking our prototype out to different events. Because there's some sensors, there's still some work that needs to be done, some hardware improvements.
So you can actually do it today.
I could do internal events, but I wouldn't be happy with the experience. We're doing some simulation right now because in the software because we don't have certain hardware components that are sort of expensive, and so for $50,000 I can fix that, and then not only fix that, but I can also make it easier to.
So actually, we can take this to with a certain investment, we can take it to the shows. And that can be actual promotion of the neuroplasticity and then neurorehabilitation.
And for an additional $200,000.
And if it's this is like probably would be, let me do this.
Right.
It's a call to action to the medical facilities who are having the medical shows across the world.
Absolutely.
And local, where with a certain engagement with Torque3, we can bring the leading solution, or I would not be afraid to say deep tech solution.
Right, and
to the world.
The stroke community is fairly tight. I mean, they are there. They are, they have their own support groups. They have their own communities, etc. So it would, and on top of this, we are. I don't want to say it's a done deal because we're negotiating it. We're negotiating a partnership with Pacific Stroke Association, which in the peninsula area here, or the greater Bay Area, actually the greater Bay Area, is the sort of single focal point for the stroke community. They are advocates of education for not only prevention, but also recovery. And they break away from sort of the American Heart Association and the American Stroke Association because they see that they can actually serve this area better. So instead of becoming a charter member of, like most did, they remained completely separate. And in doing so, and they saw that, I mean, to be fair, this area has so much wealth in it that by them joining those organizations, it would actually be a net loss of their amount of money they have to work with every year. Because they have, the donations from the area would end up going to the national level. So it was a smart idea. They did that, and they can provide a better service for this region. So we're looking to work with them. We're sort of passing the ideas back and forth right now on what happens, but certainly if that happens, they will be holding events strictly for us, by invitations, etc. But we need to get away from simulating certain things into actually doing it. Now, with an additional 200,000, so we're now at 250,000, we can build the next level prototype, because what we'd be doing now is taking the existing prototype, which is, I mean, prototypes are still prototypes, so none of them are beautiful. But it would be, but right now it doesn't have a lot of the feature capability that we would like to do. The next level prototype allows us to do trials. It has
clinical trials.
Internal clinical trials that Tim, Dr. Lacey can run, our CSO. So it'll be a limited one. We're not going to get, in the time frames we want to go to market, we're not going to get those long-term trials, and we know that. But if we actually run internal trials, what we'll get are indicators, document indicators. Something unique in the stroke world, that if anybody is listening to this, which I don't know, or may listen to this, they will understand this immediately. Stroke survivors usually self-report improvements. So you are getting subjective data on whether they're getting better or not. It may not be true. But with our system, we're measuring their performance 120 times a second, and we can put some relational algorithms in there to say, are the conditions inside the VR system, inside the world, the game that they're experiencing, what does it match up with what they did before? So when I run a comparison, it's not just a strict comparison of how fast they did a course or did something like this. I can actually look at the relationship of different muscle groups that are being called into action at certain times under certain conditions, and then say, well, and since it's a free world, they're not really doing it time on, matching. And they can even on the same course at the same time go slight variance around a corner or do something different or have pause. We can get very objective data to decide, are they getting better? And that is a rare bird in something where you're measuring, a patient who has a neurorehabilitation. It is there are some systems, I don't want to throw everybody under the bus on this. There are some systems that measure this, but they're not for the core system. They're for things like fingers and arms and things like that. There are some people getting objective data on certain systems. Again, these are the systems that are almost impossible to get, whereas we want to make ours common. But it does build a subjective data set for this individual that then we can present to the therapist in a manner that makes it very easy for them to see where they're gaining and where they're not gaining, so they can choose the appropriate activity. Say like, well, you're already strong or you're already gaining quickly. Here, how about we do something that gives you more of this other thing? Now remember, it's not the muscles. That's the thing. It's always thinking, well, I'm getting my muscles stronger. It says, no, it's nothing to do with the muscles. It's just the brain. Reconnecting to the nerves and the muscles. Which also is a little side note. How this works is a phenomenal sort of thing. It's called a sensoromotor loop. It's a closed loop. And for programmers out there, they understand the concept of a closed loop. But what it is for everybody else, it means that there's a loop going on that's, if you break it, we don't know what to do. So the brain gives a command. And then, based upon known conditions, then your muscles perform this. This happens very quickly. And then sensors in your body, everything from your inner ear to your skin to the feeling of pressure in your legs, etc., from the motions, all these sensors, even the sensors on the bottom of your feet, all this stuff goes back in and provides a condition, the new condition for the brain, then to send another command. This loop happens at an incredibly high rate, and that's broken in somebody who has a stroke, has any type of brain injury for one side of their body, to some level. So when they get into our device, we're simulating for them by using a control side that, oh, it's working. So if you can try to imagine, you stepped into this system on our platform, and the second you start paddling, it feels like you're cured. I mean, you're not. But we are simulating at a level to where that'll be the tears part of the moment, right? Where this person who's been dealing with for whatever now feels whole again. And it'll be, that'll be where the therapists, have to go through that. They'll get used to it. Everybody normalizes everything, but the first time they do this, if they've been, Yeah, they've been doing, for 2 years, they've been in a wheelchair or a crutch or something, and all of a sudden, everything feels normal. Everything from their grip to their arms to their legs, it all feels normal, and everything's performing like it should. You know, and they can visually see their robotic self doing this.
Like miracle happens live.
Right, yeah, it's a trick. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but it's a good trick. And now, this is the part.
Oh, you're taking your brain.
The reason I bring this up, the research for the enhanced neuroplasticity, that's there. We've got that. We say deeply immersive experiences increase neuroplasticity, and depending on the level of intensity that individual can handle, and that's not just physical, that's whatever else is going on in the world, that will, the more intense we can make the experience, the more neuroplasticity will go up. We know that. That's a given. We can address that, and we have. What we don't know is if we simulate this closed loop, how much does that help? And there's simply no data. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's tried it. So this is going to be an interesting thing, is we're going to simulate this working.
Wow.
How much does that improve it? Like, how much does that help?
That's the unknown for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to say, like, oh, and their brain's going to know it's not. But unconsciously, you'll know that it's not there. But the real question is subconsciously.
Subconsciously, you still will want to believe
right.
in it.
How much is this going to help with it versus prevent it? Because
remember with trials with placebo versus real?
Right.
Sometimes that's what you need to trick your brains to believe in it.
Right, and so the 200,000 gets us to those trials. And we're really interested to see what the indicators are on that. It may make no difference whatsoever. It may just be a tool that helps people perform. But there are some indicators from other studies, not directly related, that closing this loop, because there are other people who have tried to do it for other smaller functions, not the whole body, but for functions, that have been good indicators. So we're hoping that will actually even give us a bigger boost than the huge one we're getting already on neuroplasticity. But we'll have to wait and see. It'll certainly be a good experience for the people. And that'll be the one part of the rehab session will go from being the worst part of their day to the best part of their day. Because it'll be the time where they don't feel impaired. They don't feel broken for that part of the day. They can go into a world where there's no danger of falling down, there's no dangers at all that can really harm them. And what's more is they feel whole. They can do all the things they couldn't do.
Yes.
Yeah, and because it's robotics, we can adjust for any level. I don't care if you can barely move your legs. If you can make a motion with one of your legs, you can pedal.
So if you have a sensor.
Yeah, you can pedal. If you can make a motion with one of your arms, you can steer. So we can dial it so far down on the sensitivity that it really only takes the slightest amount of pressure to make all this happen. So, but yeah, it has some potential even beyond what we know. And so we don't talk about that finger closed loop. I think we mentioned it occasionally, but we always say we don't know beyond the obvious benefits of that. Beyond the obvious benefits of how amazing the experience would be, we don't know what the therapy benefits would be. And we're hoping that some stuff that Dr. Elzey looked into and found that it's going to be another game changer, just like the neuroplasticity. That's unproven yet. So that's one of the big stuff. So that's the total of 250 gets us to there, and then the total of 650 gets us 10 systems across 8 to 10 facilities that are. Since we don't have a timeline right now, we're not too aggressively, but we have done some. We've done some calls.
Oh, excellent.
And of course the whole thing of not paying for it gets people really interested.
There you go.
And understanding that we would work that out. They don't see that to be a problem. Now, of course, they're not the people making the call on that. They're not ultimately because hospital admin, but they don't think that would be any problem because the high-end system. The high-end systems they have now are losing money. Yeah. So why wouldn't they have one in where they just make less money? So it seems like a no-brainer for them. And we already knew that. We already knew that if you, one of our competitors is a robotic system that gives you a robotic exoskeleton for your lower legs and has you walk on a treadmill. Now there's no VR or anything, But the idea is that it does gait training and gait balance training. And we're not competing with them, by the way. That is, we're looking at the fundamental neuroplasticity connection of connecting to get you to move better. And balance and gait and all those other things are different sessions, not us. So just like, learning handwriting and doing other things. Yeah. So now we can actually do some eye stuff, not current generation, but within a year, every top-end headset will have eye tracking. I can only say that certainly because I know that the current development process in the major manufacturers, consumer ones, they're all making a professional level product that has eye tracking in it now. So aside from performance benefits, which is the reason they're doing it, to get higher resolution, for us that allows us to now know what people's eyes are doing. So Tim immediately, Dr. Lacey on our site, he immediately looked and said, "Oh, wow, there's so many things I can use that for." To help in the therapy. So if we know where they're looking, we can map that out, and we can know do they have blind spots they're just simply not looking to? Because remember, eyes have muscles, or is there some pattern recognition problem going on by putting things in the environment? So if, for example, if you're having a hard time recognizing words, or we can pick that up and then delineate how to then treat that inside the game, actually, by switching over to having things solved by you reading things as you go through. And with other indicators to help you. So that will then, since you're in a high neuroplasticity state and you're being given this challenge in the game, that automatically helps you. I mean, it's just sort of a given. But understanding it, and then again, having objective data on performance instead of subjective data from the patient is phenomenal. That's something they're not getting right now in any of these treatments. That's a big deal for the practitioners. The practitioners are like, they question them, they ask them about things, and they're getting this feedback, and they're saying, well, they're getting better, or they're not getting better. But in one case, it could be a person is getting better, but is frustrated they're not able to do the things they were able to do before, so they're self-reporting back that they're not getting better. So they change what would be a successful treatment therapy to something different. Or it could be that the person says they are getting better because they've tricked themselves into believing that. Their attitude is, yeah, I'm getting better, I was able to do something. Well, they were able to do something maybe because they wanted to believe that, and so they tried longer to accomplish something. But the treatment itself wasn't necessarily the thing that did it. It was just that outside of treatment, they were able to accomplish something. But there's no way for the practitioner to be able to delineate that without objective data. And that's what we do. We measure very specifically what's going on, and we put up, we have then comparisons to previous performance. So we can get this objective data, which is, I'm not saying it's unheard of, but it's a rare thing in rehabilitation to have objective data for comparison.
So the time is almost up.
Okay.
And what are your final thoughts or final advice for people, or final ask? What do you think would be a parting thoughts for today's session? What would you like to tell people, to the community, about neuroplasticity and overall solutions?
What I would like to say is that about 1 out of 6, you live long enough, about 1 out of 6 people are going to have a stroke. So it really comes down to almost everybody is going to know somebody. If it's not them, going to know somebody that's had a stroke. And you need to realize at that point that they'll probably survive. Acute medicine care has gotten really good. So they'll probably survive, and they're getting better, which means that the person is less impacted by the stroke. But no matter what the level of impact, they're going to have to recover from that because they have a brain injury. And that means those cells are never coming back. However damaged they are, that's it. They're not going to regrow or regenerate. So it's going to be a matter of understanding there are solutions out there. The technology or the studies they exist. Question everything about the system. Unfortunately, our system is based upon insurance payments that aren't based. The insurance payments are not relative to the quality of care. The insurance payments pay for a function. How that function is being executed by therapists or physicians, etc., the insurance company doesn't get involved in. So understanding that going forward, get into the communities, immediately question everything, try to get, seek out the best care. And unfortunately, right now, it is financially based, because if you don't have money outside of your insurance company, you're sort of put into that system and that channel. And until other systems like ours are proliferated wide, I don't understand how there would be many options if you don't. It's unfortunate. I don't think unless you have the money to do things, that you have many options at this point outside of whatever's presented to you.
Yeah.
And you may get lucky. You may be right next to a comprehensive stroke center with great inpatient facilities and great people, especially like in the Bay Area. I think we have the highest number per population in the world, which is a great place for our company to be. For a starting point, you want to start where the highest concentration of experts are, and then work from there. But definitely question it. And there are some. I mean, there are a lot of solutions out there that use VR for things like learning how to use your arms again, etc. That are are your grip. So definitely look into the possibilities, and don't get stuck on it. Maybe you don't get stuck on a stationary bicycle for 2 years. That's That's my best solution. If you have that option or nothing, it's like try to find some other. Do what you can do to get out of that situation. Yoga. I'm not going to say yoga and stationary bikes and whatever don't have any place, but they're not your primary solution, because if they're not stimulating us. Now, one thing you can do on your own is your own level of stimulation to the level of your capability. Don't just sit down and watch TV all day and eat lunch every day. If you're doing a routine, you're contributing to the limitations of your neuroplasticity. You want to say, how can I change it up every single day? Learn to play video games. I mean, that's actually one way you can do it. Increasing your neuroplasticity in one part of your day doesn't go away the second you stop doing it. Do things that on your own that are really exciting. Reality is better than video games. If you have the capability to go out and experience new things, go do that. If you don't have that capability, or that person you're caretaking for doesn't, introduce them to other media that is, but television or YouTube or anything that's just passive like that. That's not the answer. Yeah, you don't want the brain to go into routine mode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the stereotypical senior routine, which is often enforced on seniors, is to make it easier on the caregivers, is the opposite of what you want to do. Yeah.
There you go. So, David, I want to thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great, and I truly believe in Torque and what Torque is actually doing. David is an amazing founder, and he's one of the few people who will make it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.